Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's presentation, where we're going to be going over IMPLAN's data library, jumping into an overview as well as applications of the data library. Go to
We're
the
going to
next.
start here in just a couple minutes. All right, let's get started. So I'm Bjorn Markeson. I will be your guide through the IMPLAN Data Library today. I'm joined by Michael Neely, our Education Services Specialist, who will be helping out with any additional questions that may come up and handling the questions during the course of the broadcast. If you do have a question, go ahead and post them in the question box. You can choose to raise your hand and type in the question. We will have time for questions at the end of the webinar. So yeah, so we're gonna do the type of question plan for now. We might switch to audio questions at the end as well. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about two key things. One is, what is the IMPLAN Data Library and how can it be accessed? As well as a walkthrough of the IMPLAN Data Library, getting into the types of data available and customizations that you can make to the data library and the data that are available in it. So what is data library? Well, data library is essentially built on all of the data that is used to power IMPLAN. And so what it does is it pulls those data items together into a single searchable database structure that allows you to drill into that underlying data at usually the county level, to compare year-over-year values for regions, and then compare regions to each other. What this is intended to be is kind of stepping back from the input-output structure of IMPLAN Cloud and really focusing on a lot of those underlying data items to allow for regional data exploration. It includes panels of data from 2001 through 2021, which is the current data year. This is updated annually, just like our regular data, the data products for IMPLAN Cloud. And as we have done with IMPLAN Cloud, we've gone back and we've rebuilt the data in this data library using a consistent methodology, which means that we have an apples to apples comparison over years. The data that you see for 2001 isn't the data we built in 2001, it's the 2001 data built in a consistent methodology. So again, jumps and changes in the data are generally not going to be reflective of changes in methodology, but changes in the underlying data. Data library has full US coverage at the county level. So what does that mean? Whereas with IMPLAN Cloud, you purchase data and access data via a particular set of geographies, whether it's at the county level for an individual state or at the national level in a national package, you have limits to what data you can access. In data library, you have full coverage at that at the county level for the full United States. And it has a number of visualization and customization options. There's so many, we're not gonna be able to get through all of them today. What I wanna do is I wanna show you some of the key highlights of those visualizations and customizations. One thing to keep in mind, so what types of data do we have in here? Just to touch on some of these, there's data that you can access via data library that you cannot access directly or as easily via cloud. We have imputed CEW data, so census of employment and wages. You can access county to county commodity trade flows, which you cannot directly access in IMPLAN Cloud. We have location quotients available in some of our local area compare tabs. And then we can also dig into detailed regionalized tax data. One thing that is not in data library are multipliers. Multipliers and the social accounting matrix are only available via IMPLAN Cloud. What we're going to cover today specifically are industry and commodity compares, employment and wages by NAICS code in the imputed CEW dataset, trade flows, and then the local area research tab that has a number of data items pulled together that allow for particular methods and approaches of analyzing and exploring a local economy. So just before we jump into it, to answer a question that a lot of you might have, how do I access IMPLAN Data Library? You can add data library to any IMPLAN Cloud purchase as a separate add-on. You can purchase it independently of IMPLAN Cloud, but you might already have it if you have a State Explorer or national package. So if you have State Explorer plans or the national package, you already have access to data library. So with that, let's take a look at IMPLAN Data Library. Yes. So when you log into IMPLAN and you get to your IMPLAN dashboard, as you can see here, you have 4 options: regions, impacts, projects, and data library. Those first 3 are all associated with the input-output tool for IMPLAN. This 4th tab is data library, and it brings up, when it's available, brings up access to the IMPLAN data library. So what I've done is I've preset a number of items that we're going to walk through today. So I'm not building them on the fly, but when you click on data library, you come to this welcome page and a couple of different items here to just bring to your attention. We do have access to the supporting materials are available here under resources. IMPLAN Data Library is powered by a tool called Looker. And so if you want to learn more about how Looker works, you can use the Looker guides. We have a community forum for dealing with the data library. And then you can also choose to contact support. So under this need help, you can contact IMPLAN support for additional information, and this will bring you to your customer support manager. Along the top, we have access to a number of different options. the first distinction I'm going to make is between dashboards and explorers. Dashboards are pre-built tools for exploring and analyzing data. Explorers are a way of building more custom data sets, usually for export outside of the IMPLAN Data Library. And then looks are ways I can save individual processes that I build, and then local area and footprint are two additional data arrangements that I will show you near the end of our discussion today. So if I want to look at dashboards, there are a number of dashboards I can choose from. As I mentioned, we're only going to go through some of the key highlights of this. If you see things that you want to dig into more, I'm sure one of our representatives will be contacting you after the webinar, and you can ask to schedule a personalized demo to explore those data elements. One thing to keep in mind is, so demographics at the current moment is not socioeconomic demographics. It is kind of a more regional data item, but just to kind of preview this, we are looking to add such items in the near future. So what we're going to look at today are commodity compares, industry compares, the imputed CEW data, trade flows, and then this local area option. So the first one we're going to look at is commodity compare. So when we're looking at one of these dashboards, we have three key elements that are set up in the beginning. One in the upper left-hand corner is year-over-year trends in the data. In the upper right, we have a map that visualizes the data at a county level. And then we have a table at the bottom with the data in it as well. So what I've chosen here is I'm looking at this 546 unaggregated IMPLAN commodities. You can also aggregate this at the 2-digit NAICS and 3-digit NAICS levels. The data year is 2021. I can go back to 2001 as well. We're looking at this as annual domestic data. The dollar year is 2022. I'm leaving state and county blank because I want to look at all of the states and all of the counties. I'm then choosing grains, and the metric, I have three metric options: gross final demand, foreign export, and institutional sales. What I've chosen is foreign exports, and what I want to know is where and what regions are we seeing foreign exports of grains in the United States. And so what this does is this gives me, on the right-hand side, a map of those grain exports. Where are grains produced that go to foreign export? So we see a swath of the upper Midwest through Nebraska and Kansas, as well as parts of Northern California. What we see on the left are those year-over-year trends. So we can see that the largest producer of grains in 2021 was Iowa, and we can see, and the second largest was Illinois, and Iowa and Illinois trend to are on the same essential trend over time, and they are both the two largest producers of grains. Now, I'm not restricted to a single grain item, a single commodity. I can add additional grain items. So if I wanted to look at grains and oil seeds, I can look at these together, right? So this doesn't change the output that much, but what we're looking at here is now Illinois and Iowa are very similar because Illinois is a large producer of oil seeds for export. If I want to expand this to include all crops, I can do this as well. So I'm going to choose the first 10 IMPLAN commodities, I'm going to reload this, and this is going to pull together all of those different crop items across the country. Now, what we see here is this vaults California to the top of the output producer for foreign exports, primarily in the Valley region of Southern California. And the Midwest, still a large producer of crops for export, but just not at that same value as California. Now, this commodity table down below breaks down those 10 crop items by foreign exports by county, by state. I can then download this data table if I wish and use it externally. So this is that commodity compare option. And what this is looking at is sets of commodities and commodity items, again, with 3 specific metrics: gross final demand, foreign exports, and institutional sales. The second item I want to look at is the industry compare. So this is another dashboard, and this is looking at the data in a slightly different cut. So the filters along the top are essentially the same. We have dollar type, data year, dollar year. Again, I'm looking at this at just the national level. I'm looking at this at the 546 IMPLAN aggregated, unaggregated industries. And in this case, I've chosen cheese manufacturing. So I'm looking at a foods manufacturing choice. And the metric I'm choosing here is output. So what I'm looking at is output from cheese manufacturing at the county level throughout the United States. Now, again, the map shows this graphically. We see the largest producer by far is Wisconsin, even though that is a fairly faded line. We see California coming in a distant second in the output value of cheese production. Now, if I wanted to limit this, right? So let's say I didn't want to look at the whole US. I was just interested in Wisconsin, and I want to see what that value or those values look like in cheese manufacturing for output in Wisconsin. I can do this, and now this brings up a separate table that looks at cheese production in the state of Wisconsin. It looks at those output trends over time, and it gives me the value of that output in the data year that we're looking at. So again, we've limited it in this case just to the state of Wisconsin, and we can see the data items here. One option you can do is if you want those county level data and you want to export them, you can use Explore from here, and that will take you to the Explore section in which you can download those county level data for this particular item. We're going to get to Explores in just a couple minutes, but I wanted to let you know that you're not restricted to just this map. You can download those data separately as well. There's also a large number of metrics that you can choose from in your industry compare, right? So I've chosen output in this case. There are other options I can look at if I'm interested in, taxes on production and imports. I can choose that. If I want to look at average employee compensation and see how that varies over space, we can see that that's a different value. We can see those trends over time, which are relatively flat but somewhat upward sloping. Or I can look at something along the lines of total wage and salary employment. Here we go. So if I want to look at just the number of individuals employed in a particular county, I can look at that this way as well. So it gives me a number of different ways of exploring this particular industry and this particular data set for a particular region. One thing I can also look at, right, is let's move from Wisconsin. Let's keep this at wage and salary input, but I'm going to pick a different sector. So let's look at turbine and turbine generation manufacturing. I'm gonna rebuild this. What this is giving me is let's say I don't know where turbine and turbine generation manufacturing exists in the US. I can, in terms of wage and salary employment, I can use this to start exploring this industry sector. Now this gives me an idea of where individuals are employed in a particular sector. I can zoom in here in Greenville County, South Carolina, for example, has a decent level of employment in the sector. We can also see it in San Diego County as well. And so what this does is it gives me some insight into regions where particular types of employment exist across the country. So the next thing I want to look at is employment and wages by NAICS imputed CEW data. So if we want to look at specific data, usually at a specific geographic region, we can use this IMPLAN imputed CEW data set. What we're looking at here is it gives you a number of options for looking at data at the NAICS code level, right? So in this case, I'm looking at this at the 3-digit level. I'm looking at the state of Massachusetts. So I've chosen the region type is state. My state is Massachusetts. I'm looking at the 3-digit level, and I want to look at establishment counts. So this top table is based on ownership. So in other words, total count in establishments in Massachusetts. The top line is private. The orange line is local government. And then the federal government is the darker blue line that you can barely see at the bottom. You can filter that out, right? So you can say, I only want to look at privately held, or I only want to look at employment at state government level. We're going to leave this at any level now. So this imputed CEW data here gives me number of establishments for particular industry types and average annual wages per wage and salary employee in there as well. And that's from 2000 up through 2021. One thing to keep in mind, as I feel obligated to say, the 2020 data set does reflect the nature of the economy in 2020. And so if you're looking at trends over time, you'll often see kind of unique outcomes associated with those 2020 data. And so if you see something that doesn't quite make sense, it may be worth a little more exploration in the data set to understand what's exactly going on with that particular item. One additional useful piece for the imputed CEW data has to do with the imputed part. I keep saying imputed. I should probably explain what I'm talking about. So the CEW data has both disclosed and suppressed data values. So, and this is particularly true with industries that exist in small or rural counties. So you'll see a lot of data suppressed there. So you may have employment that exists at a single employer, and what you'll see is these values would be suppressed in the original data. Now, when we build IMPLAN and IMPLAN Cloud and the input-output tool, we need a full data set for detailed NAICS code data down to the county level for employment, wages, and establishments. And so what we do is we have a process by which we impute those data. Now, we can always go to our favorite site, support.implan.com, which will dig into how, why data are disclosed or non-disclosed, and how we go about imputing those data. But here I've picked a rural county in northern Minnesota, Clearwater County, and I'm looking at the largest employers in 2019 and 2021. And I'm seeing, for example, motor vehicle transmission and powertrain parts manufacturing. I know this is a major employer in the region. We're looking at about 130 employees in general. Now, if I were to look at this in terms of establishments, and I rerun this, what this is going to give me is a new data set or a new piece looking at establishment counts, but this particular employment sector is going to be down here where there's a single employer. Not seeing it right now, but that's fine. So what we're looking at is a single employer that is employing 130 individuals. This is going to be likely this is going to be an imputed data value. So it gives us visibility to employment and wage values in areas in which the nationally disclosed CEW data set may obscure some of those values. I said I was going to walk through some explorers as well. A number of our users like to use the CEW data set to pull data items. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to say, I want a full data set for the United States. I want county level data, right? And so what I've done is I've gone to the Explorer for CEW and I've built this out. So the dollar type, so we're doing real dollars as opposed to nominal. We're looking at the county as the region. The data year, I'm looking at every 5 years from 2001 to 2021. We're using it in 2022 dollars. And then I've picked the NAICS code for storage battery manufacturing. So I want to know information about employment, wages, and establishments for storage battery manufacturing across the United States. So again, this is a 6-digit level. I've pulled this data item, and then I've pulled this, so then I've chosen which items I want to have in my data table. I can also include, for example, if I want additional data, if I want to show the state as well, if I want to show ownership values, I can break it down by ownership. But in this case, I decided to do employment, establishments, and wages. And I want information about the NAICS code and description, the 5-digit FIPS code, the county name, that data year, and then employment, establishments, and wages. Now, when you pull large data sets, large being beyond the row limit of about 500, so anytime you pull full county data sets, you're going to get this alert says row limit reached. Results may be incomplete. Now, the results that may be incomplete are not the data that you've pulled. It's just the data that are displayed in this table. So what you can do is you can download this data table, and you can choose, instead of results in table, all results. So in other words, I'm pulling this into a CSV file. I'm pulling it in formatted. I want all the results. This is the file name it's going to save it in as. I have options for how I save this. I can pull this down in a text file, an Excel spreadsheet, CSV, JSON, HTML, Markdown, or just as an image. So again, I can pull this data as a CSV file and look at that and use that externally. So at this point, we can talk a little bit as well about customizations in Looker. This is going to go beyond the topic at hand today, but essentially what you can do is you can build and add custom values in this table, right? So you can add a calculation. So let's say you want to look at average employment per establishment. You can add a column, make a calculation. It gives average employment per establishment in storage battery manufacturing by county, by year. So this is a calculation that we don't have on hand, but if it's something that you're looking for and trying to use, that you can build using Looker. Now, one other key item here is that I can choose to save this as a look, right? So in other words, let's say I pull CEW data on a regular basis, but I'm new to this and I'm not exactly sure how to do it. And every time I come back, I miss a piece and I'm pulling data that it's not pulling exactly right. I can save this as a look. And what this does is, so we call it 5-year panel storage battery, right? So now I can save this as a look, and I can come back to this in the future. And so in the future, I can come back and I can say, okay, great. Now what I want is I want this same set of years. I want a different NAICS code, or I want different set of years. I can adjust that, run it again, and I don't have to rebuild the table from scratch each time. So the Explore structure is very powerful relative to the dashboard structure. It lets you pull customized sets of data, but it does have a bit more of a learning curve associated with it. And we do have walkthroughs and explanations at support.implan.com. But again, you can save those looks for future use. The next thing I want to talk about is the trade flow data. So in the dashboards, there's a choice for trade flow. I've built out a number of custom looks using the trade flow data in a way that I think will be helpful in showing what you can see with these data. So step back. IMPLAN builds county to county commodity trade data. So that's county by county. So that's 3100 by 3100 matrix by 546-ish data types. That's a lot of data. Produced in a single row for each item, you end up just shy of 2 trillion rows of data. This can be hard to manage. So one of the ways that we found is most useful is using through Looker and being able to visualize and display custom pieces of data so you can slice out the part of the data set that you're interested in rather than slogging through 2 trillion rows of trade data. So in this case, what I've done is I've built a map of trade flow data that is reconstituted wood products, so plywood. They are originating in Beltrami County, Minnesota. We are not looking at trade to the county itself, so we're just looking at trade from Beltrami County to the rest of the country. And we're looking at trade flow values greater than $100,000. So this is built using IMPLAN's gravity model. So this estimates down to very small values. I'm only interested in large amounts of trade, or at least modest values. So I'm only interested in trade more than $100,000. So Beltrami County is here in northern Minnesota. Where do we see plywood going? We see it going into the Minnesota market in the Twin Cities. We see Chicago taking a large portion of it. We see building centers throughout the US for housing growth. And then we see the port of Los Angeles and Long Beach, likely for export at this point. So we see trade from the point of production to that final destination. And what we find, or what I found talking to individuals and our users about what they use this for, is this is helpful in explaining how a particular economy is, or a particular employer at the local level is tied to a broader U.S. economy, right? So the jobs at the plywood plant in Beltrami County it's a very local phenomenon, but it's tied to the economy of the rest of the United States, and not just, the local urban center in Minneapolis-St. Paul, but to the country as a whole, including for export. And so what this allows us to do is understand kind of the interconnectedness of a particular industry to the US as a whole. If you want to know more about our trade flow data, again, we're more than happy to walk through how it works. At support.implan.com, we have a section on trade flow data that goes through an overview of what it is, why we build it, how we benchmark it, what our data sources are for it, resources for further reading, as well as a report about our gravity model and trade flow. And this really walks through how we derive and build this trade flow model. A couple of other kind of interesting uses. I am actually authenticated to view this page. Is to look at this in terms of particular types of trade. We were talking with some folks who were interested in wine in North Georgia, and so let's pull this up. So I'll look at Georgia wine line map. What this is going to show me is county to county trade in wine in Georgia. And so they were working with vintners and wine producers. They wanted to know what that market looked like. Where were those goods being traded to? And what we see here is most of that production and most of that trade occurs in North Georgia. There is some small regional effects, but most of that trade is local. And they talked with local producers and they said, yeah, this looks right. This is similar to what we would expect with information from our distributors. And so this is a good point to make, that it's important to kind of ground truth some of these data items sometimes with local experts and local on the ground knowledge. Another item we can look at is, let's take a look at two additional looks. Excuse me. So we can look at two different items. Let's look at fluid milk coming out of Wisconsin. So these were two looks that were. I'll use the other one. This was an interesting comparison that I saw in a video that was put out by some folks at University of Wisconsin Extension, looking at trade flow of both fluid milk and cheese. So here, what are we looking at? We're looking at where does fluid milk go from La Crosse County, Wisconsin? What is it? What do you see? You see a fairly close local pattern for shipping. Where does this milk go? It stays mostly in Wisconsin and Minnesota for further refinement and shipping. Now there are some values outside of that region, but the vast majority of that milk stays in Wisconsin and Minnesota. If we look at this as well in terms of, for example, cheese, we can use the same parameters and look at this, what happens with cheese from Greene County, Wisconsin, the major cheese producer. Now what we can see is after that transformation from fluid milk to cheese, we have a much more shippable product. And this allows the reach of that product much further afield to a much wider range of regions within the United States. So again, what we're looking at here is a way of representing that underlying modeled trade flow data to understand how goods that are produced in particular regions are traded throughout the United States. The last piece I want to pull up are two items looking at the local area research tab. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to look at Hamilton County, Tennessee, and I want to look at what do I have here? Richmond County, Georgia. And I'm going to look at the same industry in both locations. I'm going to look at 94, cookie and cracker manufacturing. So it's still technically Girl Scout cookie season. So we'll look at cookie and cracker manufacturing in two counties that have this industry. And what local area compare allows you to do is do side-by-side comparisons. And I'm going to show you two ways of doing it. The first is in terms of the same industry in two different counties. So here what we're looking at is we're looking at cookie and cracker manufacturing in Hamilton County, Tennessee, and Richmond County, California, and looking at these two values. So we've got about just shy of $1 billion in output in Hamilton County. We had just shy of just over $200 million of manufacturing in Richmond County, Georgia. But then it allows us to look at comparisons in terms of employment, in terms of labor income, in terms of value added, output and value added per worker. So in other words, on a per worker basis, how much output or how much value added is being generated at this local level in each of these communities. What are the average employee compensation and proprietor income in each location? And then down at the bottom, we have two additional data items. So all of the upper data items, output, value added, labor income, employee compensation, these are all available in IMPLAN Cloud, the input-output tool. At the bottom, we have two other tools for or metrics for local comparison. On the left is a location quotient. And essentially what this is if we're looking at employment in a single county, we're looking at the ratio of employment in that industry to total employment in the region divided by employment in that industry in the US as a whole or in the state divided by total employment in the nation as a state. So in other words, this value would be 1 if there was the same level or the same percentage of employment in cookie manufacturing in each of these counties as there is in the United States as a whole. If it's less than 1, it is a less common type of employment. If it's more than 1, it's more represented in that region than in the nation as a whole. So this kind of can help us get an idea of how prevalent or how dominant a particular industry is in terms of either employment or output or value added in a particular county. So in both cases, these are major employers locally, and in the sense that there's much more employment in this sector in these counties than there is either in their states or in the nation as a whole. So it's locally dominant in terms of employment, or locally highly represented in terms of employment. The second item that a number of our users have asked for over the years is a shift-share comparison. So a shift-share is a backward-looking decomposition or an attempt to attribute past change to particular trends. So in other words, in Richmond County, we saw that the actual growth of employment was about 15.9% in this sector. We want to break that down, and we know that in the nation as a whole, the U.S. as a whole in this 1 year time period grew by 2%. So that would be about 8.5 jobs. This sector, and so that's the same in both cases because we're using the same national growth effect. The industry, so cookies and crackers, shrank or stayed essentially the same. So there's very little effect associated with that. And then the difference between these two and the actual growth value is a competitive share effect, or essentially a local effect, in the sense that this industry in this region was responsible for 57% of those jobs out of 65 relative to national and industry trends. Again, it's a relative backward-looking comparison. It's not saying anything about what's going to happen in the future. We can use that as a descriptive of past activity. If you want more details on any of these items, such as location quotient or shift-share analysis, again, support.implan.com, use the search bar at the top, be able to get into the details of each of these items. I want to show one more local area comparison. In this case, what I want to look at is two different industries in the same region. So I want to look at Forsyth County, North Carolina, and then I want to look at software publishing and data processing. So data processing, hosting, and warehousing, and software publishing. I want to look at both of these items, and I want to compare this industry, these two industries, in the same region. So in other words, we want to see what these trends are for Forsyth County in two somewhat related industry sectors. So again, we can see those 1 and 3 year growth trends. We can see output and value added per worker, employee compensation per worker in both cases. So we can make those comparisons across industries. We can see location quotients. Again, in these cases, we're looking at values for data processing of close to 1, and for software publishing, much lower than 1. So much less prevalent than in the nation as a whole, about as prevalent in the nation as a whole. And then we have the shift share values here as well. So it allows you to make these comparisons either between counties for a similar industry, within the same county for different industries, or any combination thereof. There's a number of other kind of options as well. You can look at industry growth and trends, changes in occupational growth and trends, and just a region overview. So if I want to look at a particular region and want to see particular data, so in this case, we're looking at North Carolina as a whole. What are those top 10 industries? What are the industries with the highest growth rates, and occupations with the largest growth rates? And then 1 year back values for employment, output, value added, and labor income growth. So again, in addition to kind of the dashboards and explorers, we have a couple of additional tabs for local area analysis. And each of these items here have individual dashboards or individual explore processes in which you can really dive in and explore regional data, and use it for both analysis and reporting. So that's kind of a general overview of the IMPLAN Data Library. Again, we'll take, looks like we've got a few minutes for questions. So we can go ahead and post those in the question box. And Michael, if you want to read off questions as they've arrived, that would be helpful.
Sure, Bjorn. We got a few that are in here. Let's see. We have a question from Javier, and the question is there a trade flow analysis for services like hospitals? So again, this is coming back to that trade flow data. And he says, for example, inpatients or outpatients from other counties going to a county where the hospitals are located.
Jenny, I'm gonna tag you in on this, but the general answer for that is no. And what we're looking at is trade in particular types of commodities, not necessarily the flow of people going from one region to another to access services, for example. Is that correct, Jenny?
I actually don't. It's looking like Jenny's not here at the moment.
No. Okay.
So
No
Javier, if you'd like, we could get a more definitive answer for you there and follow up after the webinar. Let's see. A lot of questions about the trade flow data. Let's see here. We have a question from Ernest regarding the location quotients, and Ernest asked, what if you wanted to do a location quotient calculation factoring in the skewness of the data?
Say that again.
What if one wanted to perform a location quotient calculation factoring in the skewness of the data? I'm not 100% sure what you're getting at there.
No, I understand. So right now, the way we have the data built out, we're building those values specifically within the software. We don't have specific customizations for those.
Okay, let's see here. Let's see, question from Jared, another question on the location quotients. I'm assuming this is based on one of the values that you displayed, Bjorn, but he's asking, how can the national level location quotients be different when looking at the same industry across two geographies?
So what you're looking at, so if we're looking at two separate geographies, what that national location quotient is saying is what's the location quotient relative to the nation as a whole, right? So it's saying what is the location quotient for cookie manufacturing in County A relative to the nation? What is the location quotient for cookie manufacturing in location B relative to the nation? So that's not a national location quotient per se, it's what those location quotients are relative to.
Okay, here. And then a question from Taylor asking if you could reiterate the limitations of utilizing custom geography datasets, specifically the city level.
So yeah, so that makes sense. The datasets that we're looking at here are almost all exclusively at the county level. So we're looking at county level datasets. Some of these can be aggregated up to the state level, but we are the current state of data library does not allow for sub county geographies in its analysis. So if you're looking for data on a sub-region of a county, that's not available. If you're looking for something like an MSA, in which you're looking at multiple counties comprising a metropolitan area, you can assemble, in essence, that data county by county and aggregate it yourself. We don't have the ability to aggregate, for example, MSAs currently in the tool. But if that's something that folks are interested in, let us know. We're always improving and making adjustments to the data library.
Okay, a few more questions before we wrap up here, and I believe I can take this one from Angela. So Angela asks, on the trade flow data, again, very popular topic here, can industries be combined to create an quote unquote industry group trade flow profile? Similarly, could counties be combined to understand trade flows from a larger region? And the short answer is yes. The one caveat there is, again, that trade flow data is not necessarily based directly on industry level data. It's based specifically on commodity level data. So you could combine several commodities without breaking them apart to see, again, a group of commodities trade flows. And in the same breath, you could also do the same process for counties. So include multiple counties in that filter without breaking them up across the query table. And then you would essentially have a combined region. And let's see here. One more from James. Can you address utilizing the data library and IMPLAN to calculate impacts at a county level? Maybe my real question is if you will also have a webinar like this for IMPLAN. Bjorn, if you want to grab that one.
Yeah, absolutely. We're more than happy to schedule a demo with you specifically to walk through IMPLAN and how it works and how one can use the input-output tool associated with it. Again, I mentioned at the top of the discussion of two or three ways that you can get access to the data library. One is independently of any other IMPLAN purchase. So you can purchase access just to data library, and that does not have access to the input-output tables, and consequently the multipliers, and the process and the tools for running input-output analysis. You can also purchase it as a add-on to any IMPLAN Cloud purchase that you may already have, and you may already have it. So a number of folks purchase at the State Explorer level or the national package. In that case, you already have access to data library.
And I think that kind of piggybacks on this next question from Austin. What IMPLAN products will give full national county level access to data library? And the answer to that question is simply all access to data library provides users with that full national county level access. So that's a little bit in contrast to the input output side of the application where you can only access the regions in which you have a active subscription for, whereas data library includes all county level data across the United States.
Great. Well, we're just about at time. I think we'll wrap it up for today. We generally have monthly webinars. If you have ideas of things you would like to see for upcoming webinars, feel free to email us at support@implan.com. You can also get a demonstration of IMPLAN, a custom demonstration, both of either of data library, what you saw today, or IMPLAN Cloud's IO tools. You can schedule that at implan.com/demo, or again, email sales@implan.com, and we're more than happy to set up such a demo and make it customized for your needs. And if you have any questions or wish to provide feedback, feel free to contact support@implan.com. And if you want more details and pricing, feel free, and you're a current customer, feel free to contact your CSM for details and pricing. With that, we'll wrap it up, and thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thanks a ton, Bjorn. Everyone have a great afternoon.